Good morning, 7th grade, and welcome to your next lesson in Across 5 Aprils by Irene Hunt. I don't know how you have felt about the book so far, but I usually kind of feel like the first 4 chapters are a little slow. They would be our exposition, where it introduces our characters, it introduces the setting, and we're getting the background of the conflict with the Civil War. Now today we get to start chapter 5, which is my favorite chapter that starts the rising action. It builds the conflict. It's not just conflict about the Civil War either, it's conflict with Jethro, and it gets a little more exciting than what we've had so far. So I hope that as we read through this chapter today, you're going to start to say, hey, she actually picked a decent book, instead of being maybe, oh my gosh, she's making us read this book. So I really do enjoy starting in this chapter. Chapter 5 is a longer chapter, so this is going to be multiple videos. I imagine we're going to probably have 3 videos for chapter 5. You won't get to have the end of this until sometime next week. So let's take a preview at the questions that you have, and let's take a look here. You can see that there's a lot more questions for chapter 5. There are 11. When you submit Chapter 5, it'll be the only, I'll have you do just this one chapter instead of combining it with others. We're going to take a look just at the first half of the questions today. We probably won't even get through all of those. So we see, first of all, question 1 says, why was Ellen upset by her headaches? 2, when Jethro went to borrow the coffee from Nancy, what surprised him? 3, why was Jethro so proud that he was going to town? 4, who did Jethro meet on the road and what did the man want? 5, what did Sam Gardner give Jethro? Why? And what trouble did Jethro have in Newton? Not even quite sure we'll get that far, but I wanted you to get a little preview at some of the questions there and see some of the excitement that we may come across. All right, so we are also going to turn to our books, and at this point you should have your book. Yesterday was the wonderful day when I got to go into my classroom, lay out all of the Across 5 April books on my desks so that they could be sent home to you. So I would love it if you pulled your book copy out. I apologize, I am not on the right page because I actually already recorded this lesson and then found out when I rewatched it, there was no audio. You were just watching my lips move, which doesn't really help at all. So here we are on chapter 5, starts on page 65. I imagine that your books are the same. Okay, so here we are in chapter 5, page 65. We see Ellen lay in her bed, limp with the agony of a headache. It always happened when the supply of coffee ran out. Given a cup of strong, hot coffee, the pain would leave her almost immediately. Lacking it, her suffering mounted by the hour until the pain became almost unbearable. Schooled to believe that self-indulgence of any kind was morally unacceptable, Ellen was deeply ashamed of her dependency upon coffee. She had tried brewing heavy drinks of roasted grain or roots, but her nervous system was not deceived by a beverage that resembled coffee only in appearance. She had tried stretching out her supply by making a very weak drink, but she might as well have drunk nothing. The headaches were prevented only by coffee that was black with strength. So I'm going to talk about this for just a minute with the coffee. Those of you who know me, my morning class, I love to drink my coffee, although this cup is currently already empty. But I like to share a couple things about coffee with this chapter. So first of all, some of you are surprised when I tell you that coffee has caffeine, which is considered to be a drug. So the fact that she drinks coffee regularly, it becomes an addiction. And some of you may have that same sort of thing with pop or sodas that you drink that have caffeine in them. If you drink them regularly, you become dependent on it. And then if you stop drinking them, the result is possibly getting this horrible headache. So I always kind of share this story about some of my little personal background. You guys know that I have 4 children. When I was pregnant with my very first one, I gave up coffee. I suffered through 2 days of terrible headaches, but I thought this was worth it for my daughter. I didn't need to have that drug in me. And then about a year after she was born, I started having a cup of coffee a day again. Well, when I got pregnant with my second child, I did not give up coffee. I was tired from raising a child that I still had that 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and I was told by the doctor that it actually really was okay. After that second child was born, though, I increased up to 2 cups of coffee a day. And then when I was pregnant with my third child, I continued to drink those cups of coffee. And then after he was born, I increased up to 3 cups of coffee a day. So when I first was teaching this book, I made this comment that, oh my goodness, how many children does Ellen have? She has, was it 10 or 11 children? And what if women end up having as many cups of coffee as children they have? She's really dependent on her coffee. And that's a joke. She doesn't really drink that many cups of coffee, and that it's not true that however many children you have is how many cups of coffee you end up having. With my 4 children, I do not have 4 cups of coffee. I'm now that we're home and I feel like I'm somewhat restricted with going shopping, I really am only drinking about 1 cup of coffee a day. Although I do have a stash of decaf so that I can have another cup. But my fear has also been running out of coffee creamer, not just coffee. So enough of my side note about our coffee. But the point is that it is something that she has become dependent on, and she feels guilty about this because it's something that she doesn't have to have. It's a self-indulgence, something that makes her feel good. I enjoy holding my cup of coffee and sipping it. That's something that makes my day. But it's not something that's a necessity or a need. And she feels somewhat the same way, that she feels guilty that she is so dependent on this cup of coffee to get her through the day, that she has to have it. So she's trying to be strong. We'll see that her comment about that she doesn't have to have it. We'll continue reading. In late March of 1862, coffee had reached the unheard of price of 70 cents a pound, and the papers predicted that it would rise even higher. Ellen was appalled at the expense. Excuse me, 1 second, Colin, there are tissues right there. Okay. So the cost of coffee has gone up. Oh my goodness. This need for coffee is an evil hold on me, Matt, she told her husband on the morning after the last of the coffee grounds had been boiled until they were worthless. I'm going to suffer it out. I don't want you to bring every drop of it to me, even if you get hold of some. My body's just got to learn. She closed her eyes as the beginning pangs of her ordeal pounded at her temples. So you can, suffer it out for... It usually takes a few days of a throbbing headache. I believe I took Tylenol when I was trying to give it up. She could eat nothing all day. Matt sat beside her, pressing hot, wet cloths onto her forehead. Jenny was sober as she went about her work, and Jethro roamed about the barn and woodlot with deep trouble hounding him. Toward evening, Matt could stand it no longer. Send the boy down to Nancy's and ask for a loan of a little coffee, he told Jenny. We can't let your ma lay here like this. Send word to Nancy that some of us will go to town to fetch coffee in the morning. Jethro took off down the road as soon as Jenny told him of their father's decision. He ran for a while, and the exercise helped to warm him in the damp rawness of the March evening. He was panting as he approached the little house set back in a clearing of the woods, indistinct among the shadows and the veils of fog that enveloped it. Nancy was out at the barnyard gate watching him as he came up to the house. Are you carrying bad news, Jeth? So remember, her husband has gone off to war, and she's nervous that he might be bringing bad news about that. Nancy was, I read that. Just that Ma is bad with one of her headaches, I come to ask you for the loan of a little coffee. He put his shoulder to the heavy gate and helped her close to it. We'll pay you back tomorrow when we go to town, he added. She hung a milk bucket on the fence post and started toward the darkened house, where the 2 small boys stood at a window and stared outside. I ain't lighted up yet, she said as they walked up the path together. I don't like to leave a lamp burning when the little ones are alone inside. John warned me about that. He warned me always to be careful of his boys. So keep in mind, there is no electricity at this time, so they just have the oil lamps to use for light at night. And that would be pretty dangerous with two little boys. That's a fire they have in the house. If they were to knock that over by accident, the whole house could start on fire. So that's why she hasn't started that yet, and they're waiting in the dark for Mom to come back in. In the kitchen, she went immediately to her cupboard and took down a small bag of coffee. I don't much use this much now that John is gone. You tell your ma that she is welcome to it and give her my hopes that she will feel better soon. Seems this is the only medicine that will help her, Jethro answered. He was shy and ill at ease with Nancy. I thank you kindly for the loan of it, he added. The young children pressed close to their mother, and Jethro patted their heads awkwardly. Nancy fondled the hand of a younger one. You must come down with Jenny and play with them a little sometimes, Jeth. They're lonesome with no pa to romp with them. We're all lonesome hereabouts. She walked with him out to the road. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we was to hear all of a sudden that the war was over, Jeth? Wouldn't it be pure pleasure to have things like they used to be, with John and Bill close brothers again, Tom and Eb carrying on in their crazy boy ways, and Shad back at teaching and looking bashful at little Jenny? Jethro had never heard her talk so much as he had in the few minutes he had been there. He looked up at her face, where some of the blonde hair had escaped from the dark scarf she wore and lay against her cheeks. He wanted to say something kind and cheerful, but his tongue was tied, and he could only nod his head and hope that she felt his sympathy. When he was down the road a little distance, he turned to look back. She was standing where he'd left her with the rainy wind whipping at her skirt and the ends of her scarf. So let's pause there for a second. Let's think about Nancy's character. Remember in chapter 1, we described what she was like. She's very shy and aloof, kind of standoffish from the family. She didn't talk very much. So in this short little conversation, she was kind of babbling away, and that surprised Jethro with how much she was talking. Think about that, though. It's kind of similar to the situation that we're in right now. We're home alone all day with our family, and sometimes, we're getting lonely. We're looking for somebody to be able to talk to. I know my husband still goes to work during the day, and when he gets home, there are times when I just unload on him everything from the day. And that's kind of what Nancy is doing here. She hasn't had any other adults to really talk to that when Jethro comes by, she just starts talking and sharing some of her hopes with him. All right, let's continue. We're right here. At home, Jenny hurried to make a pot of steaming coffee. When it was done, Matt carried a cup of it to Ellen. Drink it, Mother, he told her. Drink the coffee and have 1 hour of comfort before this day is over. By the time the evening work was over, the coffee had worked its miracle, and Ellen got up from her bed, white and weak, but released from the pain that had tortured her all day. Jenny took a plate of warm food to her and ate slowly at first, then hungrily as she sat beside Matt at the fireplace. They talked together in low voices as if they had been parted for a long while. After a time, his father called to Jethro. Jeth, we need coffee and a passel of other things from town. Do you think you could manage the team and do some chores for us in Newton tomorrow? So remember, passel is one of our vocab words, not one we use very often, but it means a bunch. We need a bunch of things. It was 15 miles to Newton. To cover that distance with a team, to do the chores and handle money, that was a man's job. To be trusted with it was a huge satisfaction. I know I can do it, Pa. There's nothing hard about it. Just keeping a level head and using gumption. So we've got this question about why is Jethro so proud to go to town? So keep in mind that Newton is several miles away. He's got to take the wagon and the team all by himself. So the horses, he's going to handle the horses, and he's going to handle all the money and pay for everything in town. His father smiled. Anyway, you've got the words smooth on your tongue. Well, you are 10 now. I reckon that's old enough to take on a sizable job. 10, that's how old my son is. I'm not sure I'd be able to trust him to take the wagon and horses into town all by himself. Of course, we don't have any horses, so but quite often he's stuck riding along with Mom. Mommy. Excuse me for 1 second. That's not what I meant to do. Sorry about that. It was full of interruptions. Okay, let's continue reading. We are over here. His mother's eyes were thoughtful as she looked up at him. Jethro was afraid that she might interfere, but she didn't. I'd be proud to do it for you, Pa, he said. All right, get to your bed then. We'll have to be up by 4 to ready everything. I don't allow to call you more than once. They loaded the wagon in cold darkness the next morning. There were canvas sacks of corn, some to be ground for home use, some sold outright to pay for the coffee and sugar, nails, axe handle, and tobacco that Jenny had written on a list. A few chickens lay in the wagon bed too, their feet tied together. These Jethro was to trade for calico and thread for Jenny, and mittens for himself, if there was change due him. Ellen made him share her coffee that morning. A fragrant cup diluted with hot milk. Jenny cooked a kettle of cornmeal mush and made Jethro's portion into pudding with a little sugar, ordinarily set aside for company meals, and a covering of rich cream. It was a good breakfast, and he felt warm and confident when he went outside again to the waiting team. Off in the early dawn, Jethro's spirits climbed with the increased tempo of his team's hoofbeats. He had 15 miles to travel. Master of his team, navigator of his route, he felt proud and exhilarated by his freedom and sense of adventure. The wind of the night before had subsided, and though the cold was still sharp, it was more endurable. The horses liked it. They pranced a little during the first 2 miles, heartened by an extra good breakfast and perhaps conscious of a light hand on the reins. People were moving about their morning chores in barnyards or woodlots. Inevitably, they stood still, watching the approach of the wagon as it rattled down the road. Invariably, they waved a hand in greeting and stood watching for a long time as Jethro passed, as if trying to guess whose team it was and whose boy was out on the road at such an early hour. 3 miles south of Rose Hill, an old man waited at the side of the road for the wagon to approach and held up his hand as a signal for Jethro to stop. You on your way to Newton, young feller? Yes, sir, Jethro answered, and added the neighborly courtesy he had often heard his father extend. Anything I can do for you in town? Yes, there is. I want you to bring me every newspaper you can lay your hands on. He limped out to the wagon and peered up at Jethro. Well now, ain't you kind of young stripling to be driving alone down to the big town? I'm 10, Jethro answered coolly. I reckon you ain't more than that anyway. Whose boy did you say you was? I'm Matt Crichton's youngest boy. He wondered how many times he had made that statement. Matt Crichton's boy, huh? Well, yes, I know Matt. Knowed him for a tolerable time. He laid hands on the edge of the wagon bed. You got some growed-up brothers in the war, ain't you? Yes, sir. Tom and Eb was with Grant at Donelson. We heard from Tom after the battle. Then there's my oldest brother, John. He just enlisted last month. And wasn't there one of Matt's boys that joined up with the Rebs? Seems like I heard of it. Jethro hesitated. We don't know for sure. Bill left last fall. He ain't never sent us any word. I see. The old man smirked a little and nodded, as if at his own thought. Well, it's a sorry thing. Matt Crichton's a good man, too. Jethro suddenly felt hot with anger. You want me to pick up a newspaper for you, do you, mister? He asked curtly, flicking the lines a little on the horses' rumps. Well, yes, I do, but you don't have to be in such all fired up hurry. I want you to tell me something. Have you heard your folks talking about a battle at this place called Pea Ridge? My sister and me has read considerable about it in the papers. The old man leaned forward eagerly. Well, look here. I want you to tell me about it. I got a grandson under the command of some Dutchman named Seigel. Folks are telling me that he must have been in this here Pea Ridge battle. Jethro had read the account of Pea Ridge in the paper and had learned the names of commanders on both sides, and he followed the report. Jenny had studied it with him, and together they had mastered something of an understanding of the battle. They knew that it was a task Shadrach Yale would have set for them. Yes, there was a general by the name of Seigel at Pea Ridge, Jethro said, forgetting his anger a little in his interest of instructing the old man. There was lots of talk about him in the papers. His boys like him. They say, I fights Mike Seigel, like it's a thing they're real proud about. And this Pea Ridge place, whereabouts is it, boy? Do you happen to know? It's in Arkansas, only a little way from the Missouri border. And was it Grant that led our fellers? No, sir, a general named Curtis. He was the big one, I think, and under him was Seigel and lots of other officers, one of them by the name of Jefferson Davis. Jethro laughed a little at the irony. So I'm not sure how many of you can catch on to that irony. So keep in mind all the states that seceded from the Union. I'm going to hold up this picture that I was able to get out of my classroom. Well, you can see this here. These blue states at the bottom represent all of the ones that had seceded from the Union. And you can't really see this very well, I'm noticing. And then this gray one on the side here, this is Missouri. That's where Pea Ridge is. Right above it, this other blue one. Nope, I was wrong. This blue one is Missouri. And then underneath it is Arkansas. And Arkansas, we're going to talk about in a different one. Missouri is the blue one here. So that was with the other side. No, it wasn't. It's a border state. These are two different blues. Can you make that out? We've got the dark blue and the light blues. So Missouri and Kentucky, the two that border our state of Illinois, those were considered border states. And they are slave states that did not secede from the Union. Okay, so there was a discussion earlier about Wilkes, whether or not Kentucky was secede, and they did not. Those gray states were ones that seceded after the fall of Fort Sumter. So we can see where that line is. That line in gray is that Confederate line that Shadrach was talking about in the last chapter. So why do I show this to you? When they left the Union, they needed their own president. And that president was named Jefferson Davis. So it seems kind of ironic that we have a general on the Union side also named Jefferson Davis. So that's kind of funny. All right, let's keep taking a look here. And how about the other side? It wasn't Bobby Lee as led them. So Bobby Lee, we haven't talked about him yet. And that is short for Robert E. Lee. And he was the head general for the Confederate side. And pretty much the entire way through, he led a lot of battles, won a lot, and the North kind of feared him quite a bit. But not in this particular battle. No, but there was a passel of Reb generals there. Van Dorn was one of them, and McCulloch and Pike. He's the one that had a band of Indians fighting for him. You don't mean to say it. That's what the paper said. Jethro searched his memory for more details of the newspaper accounts. They claim that this battle clinches Missouri to our side, same as Donelson clinched Kentucky, he added. The old man looked down at the muddy tracks made by the wagon wheels. I don't know if they'd write names of boys that got killed or hurt and put them in the papers. Some folks say they don't, but I allow to be on the lookout. May as well tell you I can't read, but I know my name in print, and the boys got my name. That's why I try to send for a paper whenever I see somebody driving into town. I'll bring you one for sure. Boy like you able to read the war talk, huh? Yes, sir, middling well. Wish you was around to read to me the news. Little neighbor girl comes in now and then and reads to me. She's got a quick, sassy way of reading. I don't much doubt that she calls all the words right. He struggled in the depths of his pocket for a coin. Don't you forget now, Jake Roscoe's the name. So we finally got the answer to number 4. We've been talking to this gentleman for a while. We finally caught his name. His name is Jake Roscoe. What is it that he wants? There's one main thing that he wants Jethro to get for him. Make sure that you catch that. I'll not forget, Jethro started his team going. When he had gone a little way, he looked back and waved to the stooped figure in the roadside. The old man waved back timidly. The sun was beginning to warm the air a little as Jethro drove on, and it brightened the muddy brown fields on either side of the road with something that looked like a half promise of spring. There was a quality about the air which was different from that of the day before, a freshness, almost a hint of fragrance. It was something that gave heart to one who hated the cold dreariness of winter. A little distance from Roscoe's place, the route led through a woods for a little more than 2 miles, and here the sun's rays barely got through the great bare branches that overlapped and intertwined above the narrow road. Once, when a deer dashed across the path, Jethro was hard put to calm his frightened team. Once he caught the red flash of a foxtail as it disappeared in the tangle of low brush, under which the last grimy remains of winter snow lay in desperate piles. And that's where we're going to pause for today. I'm going to try to keep it, like I said, between 20 and 30 minutes. I'm not 100% sure how long this one was, but hopefully I'm within that time frame. And we'll continue after that. So today you should be able to answer the first 4 questions. Make sure you take some time to do that. Make sure you start with a capital letter. You restate the question into your answer, give text details where you can, and explain where you can as well. Don't forget to put periods at the end of your sentences, whether you are typing or handwriting them. And I will see you for the next lesson when we continue chapter 5. Bye.